up, everyone? Here we are back with the Warrior Poet Project podcast. Been a little while. Sorry about that. We'll try to improve. But for waiting, we have a very special podcast here all about floating, sensory deprivation. Going to get your questions answered. Going to talk about some weird experiences. Here with the man himself, Kevin Johnson, who is the owner and operator of the Zero Gravity Institute, the best place I've ever been to float. I haven't been that much, but but this is immaculate. It's exactly what you would want, and you've done a great job.
Thanks.
And it makes a lot of sense because you floated how many times now?
I think I've got around 360, maybe a little more than that. I kind of lost count along the way.
That is a lot of trips to outer space, sir.
That's a lot of trips to outer space.
Yeah, for sure. So you started right about when this became commercially viable, right? That's what you were telling me earlier. So tell us a little bit about that, how the origins of the sensory deprivation tank came about.
Well, I first found out about them in the mid-'80s, around 1985, but the tank itself was invented in 1954 by a neuropsychologist named John C. Lilly.
Yep.
Also a linguist.
And he would, and Joe tells that story all the time. He would inject ketamine and then go in the tank, right?
Yeah, I think
that was his program.
That was kind of later in his life that he started doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he sounded like a very interesting individual.
Yeah, I think early on he was working with the National Institute for Mental Health, and that's why he developed the tank in the first place. He was very interested to find out what the brain would do if it was deprived of all sensory input.
Yeah,
they kind of were under the impression that the brain might just shut down, and they found out it was really kind of just the opposite. It opened up in a whole new way.
Well, perhaps it opens up because some parts shut down.
That is exactly right.
Right. Yeah. So tell us, for the people who don't know too much about sensory deprivation or floating, tell us basically the principles, the theory, how your tanks are set up, and what happens when you go in.
Sure. So all the flotation tanks are kind of set up using the same principles. So we're floating in a shallow pool of water. It's about 10 inches deep, and in that 10 inches of water, we're dissolving 1,200 pounds of Epsom salt. So this is what provides you with the zero gravity effect. So you're going to enter the flotation tank. You're going to lay down on your back. As soon as you lay down, apply some surface area to the water, you're going to float just right on the top, just within the first couple inches of it. That water's heated to 93.5 degrees, which is what we call skin receptor neutral. So once you're floating, there's no difference really between the temperature of the water, your skin temperature, and the air temperature around you.
That was one thing that was really crazy for me in this experience. Because I guess the tank that I went in before wasn't exactly calibrated right, because in your tank, I was floating there and I couldn't tell whether the tops of my hands or fingers were in the water or out of the water. I had no idea at all until I just submerged them and wiggled them around. I was like, okay, now there's water. Now I can feel the resistance.
Once you get the water moving.
Yeah, exactly.
That's some external stimulation for you. But
I was really curious. So a lot of people, when they hear about this, they get an immediate fear. So let's talk about some of that fear, Orlando, because I get a fear response from a lot of people, and I'm sure you do as well. They say, it sounds like a coffin. And just on that podcast I did with Joe Rogan and Stephen Pressfield, he said the same thing.
Yeah.
Like you're going to be Dracula here for a while, and things are going to close in on you.
You guys were kind of teasing Pressfield about that whole thing. Like, we're going to lock you in the box.
Right. So Orlando, tell us about what freaks you out about this idea.
Talk about your fear, man.
I mean, like you said, it's like kind of being in a coffin. Like, you can't see anything around you because it's dark, right?
Yeah.
It's completely dark.
Complete darkness.
And then you can't hear anything either. That's already two fears of mine combined all together. And then I'm in water.
Right. You could hear your own screams, Orlando.
It sounds to me like just everything, the worst possible scenario for me.
Just down to your inner screaming.
Yeah. But, I mean, apparently it makes everybody relax. So, I mean, I guess must be a turning point.
That's the fear. Now let me take you through the actual experience of what happens. So you go in, and at least in the Zero Gravity Institute, the tank is, beautifully illuminated with some nice blue lights. It's soothing, relaxing. The door's open.
Some beautiful music playing.
It feels like a health spa in Elysium or something like that. And, the door is there. You can, where it is. You can kind of get your bearings on that. That is one thing you do want to sort out. Like, okay, remember where the door is.
We don't need a
Remember where the
panic
door is. Yeah, yeah. and then there's a few things. And for you, I think one of the things that made a big difference for me is I had the wax earplugs because I remember having some water in the ear kind of issues before.
Right.
And then the neck pillow, the inflatable neck pillow to keep my neck in a position where it wasn't straining.
Yeah.
And that made a huge difference. But basically, you ease in, and then as you're in there, the lights are still on, and then the lights kind of go out. And generally, for me, in my experience, it takes a little while to get used to it. You start fussing around, and I think I described it in my post as I call my mind in the diminutive form, which is what it deserves. It's very good at solving puzzles, but it's also very juvenile. It likes, has low attention span, and it likes to hop around. So that mind boy part of me that, just the very basic part of my mind, not the true, inner part of myself, was just fussing around for a little while. But then all of a sudden I got a little bit sleepy, and then poof, I lit up.
Yeah.
And felt like I was, really tapped in to my authentic self. And from there, it was a really wild experience. I mean, really cool.
We all have a little mind boy in us. I think everybody goes through that, when you first get in the tank, that novelty of this new environment that you've encountered. I mean, it's really, there's nothing like it on the earth. I mean, there's nothing that you can really compare it to. You're never without gravity. You're never in total darkness. You're never in total silence. I mean, even when you're at home in your bed, in the most comfortable environment that you have, it's not like this. This is a very specialized environment. And like you say, everything about it's really important. The fact that the temperature's just right. The fact that it's totally dark, totally silent. I mean, this is what causes this kind of cascading effect that happens to you, that what we call the parasympathetic response. So the mechanisms in your brain and your body start to change because we're taking away a lot of the workload from the brain and the central nervous system.
Yeah.
So, something like 90% of what you normally deal with.
So, really the way that I look at it is, I've read a lot of Aldous Huxley, and he's one of my favorite authors. Doors of Perception, yeah. So, a good amount of the brain is designed to figure out where your next meal is, who you're going to sleep with, and, like who to hump, what to eat, how to drink, how to protect yourself from tigers. That is basically what our brain is doing constantly. Eat, sleep, hump, protect from tigers, obviously metaphorically.
Right.
Except for the eat, sleep, hump part. That's not metaphorically, that's very literal. But, so that part of the brain filters out, and this is Huxley's theory, of course, and it's actually been proven with some psychedelic research too. But it filters out all of the other sensory input that, is not necessary for those basic functions. And that's, biologically, evolutionarily, it makes sense, because if you're constantly in this kind of dream state where you're deeply thinking about the nature of God and the universe and your soul's destiny, you're going to get eaten and you're not going to hump, and all the things that are bad for the organism, the body, you open yourself up to, so the brain kind of filters that out. But in the psychedelic experience, whether it comes from a tank or comes from, medicine, that part of the brain actually starts to shut down, and almost like the Venetian blinds of your perception start to open up, and you get more input from what it feels like to me, your higher self, or that source that, connects us all, whatever your belief system will allow. But something greater kind of comes in there. And it seems that with the sensory deprivation tank, that happens because you have no input for that part of the brain to worry about,
Yeah.
It's just everything else shuts down. And it's like, well, I don't need to eat. I don't need to sleep. I don't need to hump. And there's no danger. So I'm just going to check out. And whatever's left is what you get.
Yeah. I mean, we're living somewhere in the middle of this larger scale, because there's something like, 11 million bits of information handed to the brain every second. I mean, that's mind-boggling, right? Like where would we be if we were on that end of the scale as well? You know, you talk about like being off in this dreamland, thinking of, you know, nothing but your consciousness and God and spirituality and everything. But what if you were on the other side of the scale? What if you were consciously aware of 11 billion bits a second entering your brain, you know? So,
and you couldn't filter all that data out. Yeah.
I mean,
Focus on it.
Thank God we have those filters.
Sure.
You know, because we'd all
important.
be running around like mad people.
We'd be eaten.
Yeah.
We'd be eaten. We would be slaves to some chimpanzee species.
Right.
Just doing their bidding.
So luckily
constantly.
we're somewhere in the middle of that, right? We've got these protective buffers on both sides of that are keeping us from being, you know, too dreamy or too overwhelmed, you know, and that is the part that's helping us survive. But
then it's also good to, you know, get out of that middle ground and towards the, you know, kind of polar extremes. And, you know, with the psilocybin experience, they're finding that, and I've mentioned this before, you know, you think of it as adding something to your brain. Oh, you're adding some compound that's causing you to do this. It's not what's happening at all.
Right.
The psilocybin is actually restricting a certain blood flow and information to the default mode network in your brain, which is that part of your brain that is operating like that. So that part is getting manually kind of powered down, and then the same thing is happening. More information is coming through the Venetian blinds of perception.
Different kind of information.
Different kind of information.
Used to perceiving.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I wonder a lot when I'm in the flotation tank if that's kind of the same thing that's going on. You know, there is that part of you that, I mean, you find this with a lot of floating or a lot of the psychedelic medicines that there is kind of this like innate longing for that experience, right? I mean, a lot of us keep going back over and over and over again to touch that part of us that is seemingly hard to get to out in ordinary reality. Yep. You know, and it's like, is it, you know, part of evolution? Like, have we evolved as a species and evolved culturally to where like we're overloaded with all this stimulation? You know, that's kind of my idea of what's going on in the tank, is that we're filtering out the overstimulation part and we're getting back to that truer, higher self that you talked about.
Yeah, I mean, look at life. It's all about overstimulation. Yeah. You know, I mean, especially in our culture, it was a lot easier, you know, when you're walking on the land, going on long solitary hunts for a buffalo or whatever it is.
Right.
And, you know, rising with the sun, sleeping when the sun goes down. I mean, that our lives are not even close to an approximation of that. I mean, most of us are on a computer for 10 hours a day at least, with the TV going for 4 of those hours when you get home.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, or on your phone, and it's then people, and the whole system is designed for overstimulation, for sure.
Yeah.
And so our minds are good at dealing with that and multitasking. That part of our mind is in high effect, but the other part has to retreat in order for that to kind of take over and run the ship. It doesn't have to be that way, but it seems to want to push you that way.
Yeah.
For sure. So the tanks are a great way to kind of reset that.
I mean, I love technology. Like, I love my smartphone. I love my recording studio.
Likewise.
I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here if it weren't for the amazing technology that we have. But for millions of years of our evolution, we sat on the edge of a grassland waiting for a meal to walk by.
Yeah.
Plenty of time to contemplate the universe that we lived in and, you know, think about the big questions and what was going on in our lives. Now I kind of wonder. Right. I mean, we talk about and we feel these kind of social and cultural breakdowns that are, you know, less than attractive to us. And I wonder sometimes if that's part of it. Like if people in general aren't getting enough time in their own head, you know, away from those filters. So.
Well, even back in the days we were waiting on the grassland, there were still people going to caves, you know, to isolate themselves and get less stimulation then.
Right.
You know, I mean, they knew then that they had some longing to just go inside, and, you know, it almost feels like, you know, to me, like you find your way home at that point. You know, find your way to that source that, you know, birthed you and will exist, you know, beyond your death. And the longing to at least know that, you know, is always there. I think, you know, I was really impressed with this video that Alan Watts, well, he didn't put out the video, but he gave a speech. And the premise was, you know, basically, what would you do if you were God? And the idea was that, you know, any perfectly known future becomes a past. right? Because if it's perfectly known, you already have the recollection, the memory of it. It's as if it has already happened.
Yeah.
So part of the deal was, all of us who are, represent collectively. This is, some of my belief system. All of us who represent collectively that force, that God force, that divine intelligence. We're all a part of that. And, the only way to make it interesting and to allow for growth and allow for kind of stimulation of the pond, that change, that ripple, is to forget, because if we have and just wander off on this path of, we're on an adventure. We don't know all the answers anymore. We've consciously chosen to experience this without that recollection. But some part of us wants to kind of get back under the wing a little bit and understand that. And I think that's part of what we're doing here. And it can certainly help you. It's not to say that that's the good part and this life is not the good part. And I think that's where some people go wrong too, where they get really, the ascetics who really kind of deny themselves the pleasures of this world. We're here for this world.
Yeah.
We got to enjoy everything that's a part of it. That's, otherwise what's the point?
Yeah.
You can't kind of cheat the system and just try to go straight all the way back. That's not the idea. You want to experience everything here, and reconnecting with that higher part of ourselves can help alleviate a lot of the fears and the anxieties and all the stuff that prevents us from enjoying this awesome playground that we have available to us that all too often creates unnecessary suffering.
Yeah, I like your idea of forgetting a little bit, like keeping it random so that it keeps it interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
He says, how far away can we get? That's kind of the game. How much can we forget? And that's what keeps it, exciting. And collectively, I've had a lot of thoughts about the collective, and, collectively what all of humanity is experiencing and all of life is experiencing is the experience of that, source. It's every little piece is like the mood of God, so to speak, like however we're struggling, happy, but it's all this collective experience that's, combining and creating something, at a large, at a whole.
And so you think that's what's going on when we go to the flotation tanks or we go to psychedelic medicine, like we're trying to kind of tap back into that source. I mean, that sounds a little cliche, but I guess it's cliche for a reason. I mean, it's something that humans are drawn to, always have been drawn to.
Yeah, I think so. I think ever since every culture has found their, entheogenic medicine, it seems, and have used that as a special sacrament, because the information that you seem to get, that it's different than the normal information that your mind just kind of cranks out with the hand wheel.
Right.
It feels different. You identify with it. It comes easily, and it tells you to do good things.
Right.
It gives you good advice.
Right.
I've never been in one of these deep experiences and been like, man, that was way off.
Shouldn't have listened to that voice.
What the hell was I thinking then? That's definitely not the kind of information that you get. You tap into something that's a lot smarter than you on a normal day-to-day basis. And that's certainly what happened for me in the tank this last time. So, first 10 minutes fussing around, and then for the next 30, I was locked in and really able to kind of receive information, not just receive, but you have to do a little seeking as well. Some of these experiences you can really be completely a passenger and just like, woo, come to me. But with the tank, you got to do a little bit of the work yourself, at least for me, and but it comes, what you seek, you find, to a greater degree.
So that's a little bit of kind of the individual's evolution in terms of your floating experience, right? I think you got off to a good start. If it only takes you 10 minutes to settle down in the tank and really start to reach those altered states of consciousness, then you did pretty good. Most people, especially when they are new to floating, it may take them 20 or 30 minutes to sort of get past the novelty and maybe a little bit of fear about what lies ahead. But obviously you've had some experience and some practice in your life that allows you to jump into those states of awareness a little more readily than other people might be able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it was. You get in there and you're like, oh well, if this is it, for the first 5 minutes, you're like, this is going to be a long time.
Can I stay here for an hour if it's just this?
Yeah. And then eventually you kind of settle in. And it was interesting. I got sleep. I really felt like I got sleepy first. And I was like, am I going to fall asleep? Like, is that what's going to happen? Nope, that's not what's going to happen.
We just got you in there to take a good nap.
Yeah, exactly. And just like right when I thought I was going to reach the peak of sleepiness, all of a sudden I was very alert. Like but alert in that kind of
different
calm.
kind of alert.
Yeah. Like some part of me woke up.
I think this is just brainwaves slowing down. I think this is just moving, from your alpha or beta waves and getting closer to that theta state that everyone's looking for in meditation and relaxation techniques. I think this is that feeling of, wow, I'm getting sleepy. That being said, I mean, we spend a lot of time in the tanks kind of in that limbo world between sleeping and waking that, like you are in the morning when you're dreaming really vividly, but you know that you're dreaming and you're awake because you know you have to get up soon. That like, for me, that's a lot of the time in the tank is spent kind of in that feeling, but it's productive there. You do really great thinking. You're kind of out of your own way. Your filters are down. You're not subverting your own line of thinking,
Right.
It's a little easier to stay on the point.
Yeah, no doubt. And then, in my experience, so I had about 30 minutes in that zone. And then towards the end, I had to take a pee.
Yeah.
And then that's just that little stimulus of like, hey, monkey, time to pee.
Yeah.
I was like, no, it's not time to pee yet. Just hang on. But as soon as no peeing in the tank. As warm and comfortable as it is, do not pee in any sensory deprivation.
Well, would you know if somebody did? That's the question.
Yeah, no, that's the problem. But it would be a very expensive failure. There's $1,000 worth of salt at risk there.
So don't pee in the tank. All right, just put that out there. But yeah, even that little thing. And then so it kind of brought me out. And then I started fussing around with the buoyancy and like, wow, it's really hard to push my arms down,
Man, it's so
awesome. Or like pushing off the walls and be like, how long will it take me if I just touch the wall to hit the other wall, and started doing silly things like that. And then I would catch myself and be like, Aubrey, stop, like stop playing in your environment. But it's really fun just at that point because I was very relaxed and it was just, you're in this playground that feels like outer space, When you're not bumping against the walls, you might as well be in orbit.
Yes.
It feels like that.
Yeah, that sensation of just floating in nothing is amazing. And it's what's causing a lot of the science that's going on. A lot of the chemical changes in your brain and body are caused from that.
Right.
But I mean, I'm listening to what you're saying about your experience. It's the human brain. It's so awesome, man. I mean, that's your brain just like poking at you like, no, you will not disengage from me. I have a job to do. I'm here to... It
found one little way back in. Yeah. It's like, okay.
You're going to ignore me for 45 minutes. I'll make you pee.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's the same thing when you first get in there. You'll hear your heartbeat really loud, and
breath,
and your breathing. You can hear the blood pulsing behind your ears and things like that. Just all these sounds. It's like your body's this big factory making all these gurgling noises and mechanical sounds and everything. And I swear that's just your brain refusing to put down its work and relax for a moment because we're just not used to doing it.
Yeah,
we just don't let our brains do that often enough.
And man, it feels good to do it.
It sure does.
I mean, the whole rest of that night, I actually, get out of the tank, did a lot of great work, and I can maybe jump back and talk about the vision I had. I only had one main vision, but the whole rest of the night just felt super relaxed. But I actually didn't, I wasn't tired when I went to go sleep.
Yeah.
I felt like I had slept already. Like I had hours of sleep already under my belt.
Yeah. We estimate that 1 hour in the flotation tank is equivalent to about 4 hours of sleep. Even though you're not really sleeping, just the physical rest and rejuvenation that your body's getting because it's in this environment where you're perfectly supported and perfectly comfortable. There's no pressure points. Your circulation's better than ever because you've taken gravity away. Your vascular system is dilated a little bit. So you're getting lower blood pressure, slower heart rate, slower respiratory rate. So you're resting. You're resting really deeply. And so your float was later in the evening. So it kind of doesn't surprise me that it took you a while to to want to go back
Yeah,
to sleep.
it felt
And
like I just took a late nap.
like you said, a little
you know.
more energized
Yeah.
when you come out, right? So,
Yeah, for sure. Relaxed and energized.
yeah.
You know, I had one comment, you know, I posted my experience on my Facebook page, and I had one comment, and this woman was talking about the neck pillow, and she said, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea," you know, 'cause she had neck strain issues as well. And apparently the people running her float center says, "That's just your subconscious mind trying to keep your head above water." And I was like, that is some hippie bullshit. Your neck is just in the wrong place for your body. Like,
Yeah.
just use a pillow. Like,
Yeah.
it's not you just got to relax, you know?
Right.
Just got to relax your
Relax
head.
and peace out, man.
Yeah,
It'll be
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's not it. Sometimes, you know, just mechanically,
Yeah, we're all built
we're
differently.
all built different. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have one of those monkey heads that goes forward like Vanderlei Silva.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, the neck pillow really helps.
Well, I think you're also one of those people that leads with your mind. So,
Yeah.
so you physically, you take on that characteristic where you kind of meet the world head first, you know?
Yeah, maybe so.
That doesn't strike me as unusual, but,
Yeah.
you know, we do things at Zero Gravity Institute. We're trying to create a situation where it's comfortable for everybody and every type. And this, from all of my experiences in the flotation tank and my wife, who's one of our partners, and she's had a lot of experience in the float tanks too. And we really looked at like what is every little thing that a person could need during a float session to make it perfect, you know? And so things like the earplugs and the pillows and having the water temperature exactly right. I mean, I designed those tanks so that they're computer monitored. So there's actually a computer that's taking care of heating the water and keeping it at that exact temperature. My experience in floating has taught me a lot about the salinity level that's in the tank, like keeping it just right so that you're at the perfect level in the water, which helps to. I don't want you floating too high in the water
Right.
or too low in the water, because too high in the water, your neck's going to be leaning way back, and that's
Right.
going to cause stress physically. Too low in the water, and the water line's going to be too close to your eye, and then you're going to be, you know, distracted through your float about whether or not you're going to get salt water in your face. So.
And there was also some people concerned about they'd experienced a tank creating condensation on the ceiling of the tank and then dripping back into their eyes.
Yeah.
Which definitely was not happening in your tank.
Right.
You know, that was not part of this program for sure.
So, right. Yeah. The tanks that you floated in at Zero Gravity are tanks that I designed and manufactured. So they're much bigger than a typical flotation tank. So historically, a float tank has been about 4 feet wide and about 4 feet tall and about 8 feet long.
Like a coffin, Orlando.
Like a
Just like
coffin,
a coffin.
Orlando.
Great. Sounds awesome.
And I used to work at a flotation center in California that was the first commercial center in the world. And so this is one of the main things that we heard from people coming in, people that were ready to float. They'd read about the experience. They were, you know, super psyched to be there. Then they would walk in the float room and they'd see this big black coffin. And they'd turn around and they'd be like, no way, I'm not getting
Couldn't
in
you
that
have
thing."
painted it a more friendly color than black?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
like neon green.
Yeah.
No one's scared of neon
A
green.
lovely yellow.
A lovely yellow. Who's scared of a canary yellow?
And so when I designed these tanks, I wanted to get all of these issues out of the way. You know, I wanted them to be user friendly. I didn't want them to be intimidating when you walked into the room and saw them.
Yeah.
And so I made these tanks that were, you know, so they're 6 feet wide, they're 8 feet long, they're 7 feet tall. You can get in it and walk around. It's the size of a queen size bed, right? So
Don't get any ideas. There's none of that in a tank
yeah,
either.
one person at a time.
One person at a time.
And yeah, but I wanted to remove that psychological element. I mean, in a traditional float tank, a smaller tank, if you're claustrophobic at all or think that you might be, it doesn't matter what I say to you. It doesn't matter if I tell you that once it's completely dark, those boundaries are gone. You're going to be stressed out when we get you in that tank, and that defeats the purpose of having you there in the first place, because it's all about relaxing and the states of consciousness that are achieved through deep states of relaxation. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to get rid of all that. I did the math and worked out the ventilation system in a way that we didn't have condensation on the ceiling. You know, I mean, how distracting is that? You're in the middle
Well,
of
one
a
of the
float and it
coolest
starts raining
one of the
on you.
coolest things is that it's indistinguishable whether your eyes are open or closed.
Yes.
And there's certain times where you're thinking, I really feel like my right eye is open and my left eye is closed. I remember thinking that at some point. I was like, I'm not winking like a pirate right now, but that's what it feels like to me. Like one part zoned out. You just can't tell.
Right.
You know, at a certain point when you're so relaxed and your eyelids are so relaxed, open, closed. Right. I mean, you have to like blink intentionally.
That's it.
To figure out whether they're open or closed.
A lot of times you'll go way away from your body. Since there are no body sensations, your consciousness will drift way away from your body. Then when you come back, it's like you sort of have lost track of what status was I at when I left my body,
right?
You know? And I do the same thing. Like I have to go, okay, open, close, and decide whether my eyes are open or not.
Yeah,
you know?
It was really, really pretty interesting, especially my eyes were operating on different kind of independently of each other. That I'd like to kind of see if there's anybody else that's experienced that, but it was an interesting phenomenon.
One eye in the tank with your physical body, and the other eye was peering out into the universe.
Like my left. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
Has that happened to you?
Well, I know what you're talking. I know that sensation. Yeah.
Man, that was weird because my left eye was like kind of still there, like keeping an eye on the body.
Right.
You know, like literally, like the expression says, keeping an eye out. It was like one eye. I was like, all right, I got this. Right. And the other eye was like, poof, just in, the galaxy somewhere.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's like left brain, right brain activity. I mean, I find sometimes that I'm not floating symmetrically, like you envision this, picture of someone floating in perfect formation, but it's not that way for me at all. Sometimes I've got one arm up over my head, one leg kind of sticking out to the side. It's another reason I made the tank so big. It's because I'm out of control when I float.
Yeah. Have you seen those survival shows where they create a compass, by charging a piece of wire or a paper clip or something like that and putting it on a leaf and floating around? I kept orienting like catty corner one way, and I was like, I wonder if I'm like a giant charged compass right now, and I'm aligning.
Which direction was your head pointing, and what does that say about you, Aubrey?
Nothing. But that's probably just my mind being stupid and being like, hey, I wonder if this is significant, trying to figure it out. But I kept aligning like the same way, and I would catch myself in the catty corner. My head would be like directly catty corner to that back left corner, so I'm bisecting it on an angle. I'm like, why do I keep ending up this way?
You turned into a compass.
Yeah, exactly. And then I would orient myself again, and then I'd drift back into the same spot. But and we talk a lot about, galaxy and source and higher self, but it's really good for just figuring out regular everyday problems too, and challenges. You're just able to really focus on even the most mundane obstacle that you can't seem to figure out. You can just zero right in and make a lot of headway, a lot of progress.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about the tanks as a tool for human potential, because your brain is going to present to you, your mind is going to present to you what it is that you need to work on. That's sort of the trust that we get to with the float tanks. After as many floats as I've had, I very rarely enter the tank with some specific goal or some specific intention. Certainly there's room for that. Like, there's no rules about floating, right?
Sure.
But I find that when I become a passive and neutral observer of my experiences in the tank, then my brain will sort of dig up the things that, here you go, Kevin. There's something you need to be thinking about today, or something you need to be working on,
Right.
And it's amazing. It's amazing how revealing that can be.
For sure.
A little time with yourself is a good thing.
For sure. Yeah, it's certainly a balance of setting your intent and then letting go.
Yeah.
It's the same with any psychedelic experience, really. I mean, you want to be a passenger,
right,
but you also want to kind of set a little bit of the course, at least for me, say,
right,
okay, here are some loose areas that might be interesting to explore.
Right.
And sometimes it's more directed than that. And then you'd let it go. And usually you'll find that you end up where you wanted to go, unless you were really misguided and be like, and I've had experiences where I'm like, all right, I really got to figure this out. Right. And then in the first 9 seconds, I'm like, that was silly.
Yeah.
All right, back on to the real work here.
Right.
Like the answer was already really obvious. And things like that. But I think it is that kind of dance between setting your intent and then just allowing the experience to take you where it needs to go.
You're absolutely right. I mean, let me say that, entering the tank with specific intention is incredible. I mean, you are, talk about getting your work done, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, we have writers, artists, musicians, poets, scientists, businessmen. People come in there for all different kinds of reasons. And there's a sense in the tanks that, let me rephrase that. When people are talking about the tanks, there's this sense that they're supposed to have this big, profound, visionary experience, which is possible, but not the only thing that you should be seeking in the tank.
Right.
Depending on who you are, what's important to you, then that's why I say that your brain will present the work that you need to do. I have in the past gone into the tank with very specific intentions, long experiments that I was doing where, day after day, every day I would go in the tank with a very specific purpose for being there. And it can be incredibly productive.
Yeah.
I did this experiment several years ago where I was trying to retrieve memory, right? So I was fascinated by the idea of being able to retrieve memories from very, very early childhood with the possibility of even remembering being inside the womb, and on a more loftier goal, like where there are collective memories that could be tapped into, right? And
Trying to go deep.
Trying to go really deep, you know, and it was amazing because I was pulling out these memories of being a little kid, and some just mundane thing in life that would just suddenly be this vivid memory. And I would get out of the tank and I would call my mom and I'd say, "Hey, do you remember when this happened?" And she would just be floored. She's like, "Oh, there's no way that you can remember that. You weren't even 3 years old." And I'd go into detail and I'd be like, "No, I'll tell you like what the carpet was like in the living room."
So how far did you get to go?
The furthest that I got back was I had this beautiful memory of being a baby and lying on my mom's stomach while she was lying on her back, and the feeling of her breathing, lifting me up and down, up and down. And this is the first feeling that I got in the tank, was the feeling that I was going up and down and up and down.
That's
and
wild.
It took me back to this moment, and I felt I felt very small, very vulnerable, very open.
So you remembered it as the child there.
Absolutely.
You kind of went back to that state.
I remembered my feelings of it. It wasn't like a visual memory.
Right.
It was like the feeling of being there, and just how vulnerable and fragile that I felt. And she was a giant in that feeling. Like she was just this bigger than life kind of thing, this force around me, and it maybe that's human bonding, like maybe that's the bonding moment that you have with your mother or whatever, but that's as far back as I was ever.
That's really
able
interesting.
to retrieve.
The first time I did Iboga, which is a 24-hour experience, you have lots of time.
Oh, man.
So I ran out of shit to think about after about hour 10. So one of the things that I did was a very similar thing, and I decided I was going to walk through, in my memory, through every house that I'd ever lived in. Mm-hmm. And it was unbelievable how much detail I remembered. Yeah. The stairs, the floor, what paintings were on the walls, even from when I was like a young child. And I could go, there was some remodel that was done in one of my houses. I could go before the remodel, after the remodel. Like I could pick the textures of the couch, feel that. I mean, all of these little minutia of detail that I thought were gone.
Right.
I was able to walk through, and I still can do that now that I kind of reawaken those feelings. But the farthest I got back, which just kind of reminds me of what you were saying, is I remember a feeling of laying on my back and stretching my arm out and moving it around. And I was stretching my arms out, and it was this feeling of, whoa, I can control this hand. It was like that first moment of, wow, my brain can say, hand, do this, and it does that. And I don't know what age that was, but I was on my back and I was doing the same thing again. That kind of like, wow, look at this crazy vehicle I'm in,
Right.
and I can control it. It's awesome.
These are some of your first moments of being self-aware.
Yeah.
Right. Science has asked that question a lot. Like, when, as human beings, do we become self-aware? When do we look into the mirror and realize that it's us,
Yeah.
and not just another baby,
Yeah.
or whatever? And you see little kids do that all the time, right? I mean, that they're looking at their hands, arms up in the air, experimenting with their body.
Yeah.
What a cool thing for you to
It was.
remember.
Yeah, it was.
And this was during your Iboga experience.
But, again, it just shows the parallels. And, I made a video called The Psychedelic Experience, and, a lot of it talks about the, plant medicines, but, there's a lot of ways to get there.
Yeah.
And this is one of the best ways to get there. First of all, you're not going to have police worry or concern, which is a major problem, which is why I don't recommend doing, psychedelics here in the States. Why I always go to Peru for ayahuasca or Costa Rica for iboga or places where it's legal, just so you don't even have that stress.
Right.
I mean, even if the risk is low, you don't want to be in this space where you're really trying to be open and vulnerable and explore and be worried that a, cop's going to bust down the door and throw you in jail, which is insanity, but it's reality.
Right.
So you have to deal with it. But a float tank can get you, a lot of the way there. All right, maybe the visuals aren't going to be like a DMT experience. You're not going to burst through this Alex Gregg chrysanthemum of light and energy and colors.
Right.
But you will have some visions and some things, but you'll get to the real meat of it. A lot of that kind of splashing of vision is a little bit just part of the firework display. Really what you're doing in that is getting to the deeper modes of thinking.
Right.
People sometimes think of the psychedelic experiences like that's what you're after, is these visions.
The visuals, yeah.
But the visuals are oftentimes just kind of the fun part of it, and then the real
part.
meat. Occasionally the visions are instructive and didactic. A dragon taught me a lot, and I had an eagle teach me some stuff. But that's way less common than I'm just being like, whoa, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And that's generally what that is. And, a lot of times for me in those spaces, it's just like, that's fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
But that's all it really is. It's a fireworks show. And then the real work is happening with the thinking. And the same real work is happening in the tank.
Yeah. Well, I think you can get to some of those pretty fantastic visual moments in the tank. It takes some practice. It takes, the big game, the skill that you're learning when you're in the tank is how to let go, and then let go more, and then let go more, so
isn't that the whole game of life?
Isn't it though?
It really is. Like the more I become older and a little bit less ignorant, I wouldn't say wiser, but I think we're just trying to get a little less ignorant. The more I realize that the hard part is not when you see a challenge in front of you and you say, I need to defeat that, bring all my power. For me, that's the easy part. The hard challenges are the ones where I have to let go of that attachment, let go of that fear, let go of that stress, where you don't have a dragon to slay, that's tangible. You have some kind of thing that you have to let go. And that's really one of the big keys to living a happy, fulfilled life, is letting go. Yeah. And what a tool to have is to be able to go to the tank, which is entirely that process in a microcosm.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're lucky to have the tanks. I think it's kind of, without being too lofty about it, I think it's kind of our chance as a culture to have that kind of medicine. It's legal, it's healthy. You don't have to worry about all those things. I'm sad that we're not able to use psychedelic medicine in this country. I'm doing some research right now about Peru and the ayahuasca experience, and I'm preparing to do that myself. But,
very cool.
And I'd love to talk to you more about that. But I think for right now, what we have in the flotation tank is a great tool for seekers and explorers in kind of a unique way, right? The flotation tank has no dogma attached to it, and this is what I love about it. It's sort of the tool for the self-guided, right? You don't have to go in there and have a certain chant or a mantra. You don't have to wear a hat or a piece of jewelry or anything like that. There's no rules about it. If you want to float in the tank with some music, you can do that. If you want to keep the door open, you can do that. If you want to close everything and go all the way and go as deep as you can possibly go, you can do that. There's no rules applied to it. So it's great for the person who's seeking their own
Except
path.
for don't pee in it. That's
Yeah.
a rule.
Yeah, that is a rule, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just contradicted myself. Yeah, but I think it's just a cool option that we have, and I wish that more people had experience with it. I think that I see people change literally right in front of my eyes. I mean, they can walk into the float center, and I sensitive to people's energy as they come in. It's very interesting to watch people come in from the world, and they're carrying a lot with them. You can see them physically manifesting.
You should really do a before after, like
Yeah.
5-second video clip. Just be like, hey, what's up? My name's Aubrey, and I'm here to float. And then just do the same thing when they come out, like, hey, what's up?
I wish
my name's
sometimes
Aubrey, and I just floated.
Yeah,
And it was awesome.
yeah.
Like just see the different countenance.
Because that's how it is for everybody.
Yeah, I could
wish
feel
people
it.
could see a picture of
Do it.
themselves before and
Do it.
after. We should start doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
And just to see you physically change, like your shoulders come down,
Mm-hmm.
your head's more relaxed, you're talking a little differently. It's amazing.
It is. So, hopefully a lot of you listening have some access to this. I know they're not out there everywhere.
But they're coming.
But they're moving fast.
Yeah, there's more and more of them opening up all the time. We get phone calls a couple times a week from float centers that are getting ready to open in different parts of the world and talking to us about using our tanks in their float centers and stuff.
Yep.
So
and
it's
at the very least, you're going to have an incredibly relaxing, restorative experience.
Yeah.
Don't go in there with these expectations of some immaculate, understanding or grandeur. Just go in there, trust that you're going to relax, trust that you're going to feel good when you're done.
Right.
And you're going to get that,
Right.
and everything else, there's a hell of a chance you're going to get that too,
Yeah.
but at the very minimum, you're going to feel pretty cool when you're done.
That's a really good thing to bring up. Good warning for people about the tanks is sometimes your own expectations, some of the mythology and the stories that surround floating can really inhibit your experience in the tank, because you're going in there thinking that you're going to get shot out into the universe and
Right.
you're going to go out of your body and have all this amazing stuff happen, which is totally possible. But if you go in there like click the stopwatch and
It's
wait
just
for the shit to happen,
it's another tool for your mind to say, hey, that's not happening yet. Hey, that's not happening.
Yeah.
When is this going to happen? Just let all that stuff go.
Yeah, exactly. And when you let it go and when you become that neutral observer of your own experience, that's when the big stuff starts to happen. Right? You're out of your own way, and you can sort of uncork the bottle and let the flow start to happen.
For sure. So Orlando, what do we got to do to get you in the tank, man?
I am going. I'm
You're
going to
going.
do it.
You're going to do
I'm
it.
going to do it on Saturday.
All right.
Saturday
Yeah.
afternoon.
Saturday.
Comfortably far enough away that you
Yeah.
don't have to commit, I see.
Yeah. Well, I figure after a tough soccer game, that'd probably be a pretty good way to
But did you
wind
hear him?
down.
He was like, I'm coming in. I'm going to do it on Saturday. The fear crept back in. I saw it.
Yeah, I'll definitely do it.
Yeah, you should. We'll have to talk about it on next time after you do it on Saturday.
I will on Saturday.
Yeah, we're going to try to put together a podcast where we do some interviews with people who sort of do their before and after experiences, and start collecting some of that for people to share, because I think that would help with introduce a lot of new people to it, people who might be a little bit nervous or skeptical about doing it. I think if there was a resource for them to look at the experiences that other people were having, I think it would open it up to a lot more people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I really think if you just had some people, obviously voluntarily, people who are frequent, just come in and say, say your name. I am blank, and I feel, or how am I doing today? No, I'm doing pretty good, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, it's not even so much what they're saying. You'll just see, because pictures are only a picture, but if you actually get to see even like 5 seconds,
Yeah.
you'll see a change. Your voice sounds different. Your whole body's like,
Yeah.
this feels good. So that would be awesome. Well, man, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for pushing this industry forward. Thank you for bringing this opportunity to Austin. I'm certainly going to take advantage of it. Orlando may, but we'll keep pushing him.
I'll be there on Saturday. You'll see me.
So that sounds good. And anybody in the Austin area who wants to come to the Austin area, Zero Gravity Institute is the name. Where can they find you?
we're at zerogravityinstitute.com. There's a website there with a lot of information. You can go to Facebook. We have a Zero Gravity Institute page on Facebook. I want to take a minute though and thank you and Joe Rogan too. You guys are
I'll pass it along.
great voices for floating and the benefits of floating. We have so many people that come through the doors and talk about like, oh, I heard about it on a podcast, and it's guys like you that are not afraid to get in front of the microphone and talk about the interest that you have and the things that you do. And it opens people's minds to the possibilities that are out there. And I know that a lot of times I hear interviews with you and you talk about the benefits of the tank and the possibilities of peeling back the layers that we have on us in the tank. And I personally, I appreciate what you do. And I know that other people in the float business really appreciate what you do.
I certainly appreciate that sentiment. And for me, it's just I'm happy to talk about any tool that's helped me, because if it's helped me, there's a good chance it can help other people. And I know, Joe feels the same. It's just we talk about the stuff that has worked for us, and we'll talk about the stuff that doesn't work for us too, and we'll let you know that. But the tank is something that really this experience was. I could see the potential from the last experience, but this was the one that really kind of woke me up to how practical it was. And it was just a few little things. For me, it was the neck pillow, it was the earplugs. And so that was it. I also get a lot of questions. I want to address this on the podcast. Sure. So people ask, oh, should I smoke some weed before I go in? Should I do it sober? And I think the best way for me to explain that is the tank itself is medicine.
Yes.
And just like any other entheogen is medicine itself,
right.
Mushrooms or anything like that. Until you really know that medicine, until you really know it, don't combine it with anything else.
I agree 100%.
That's you just. Maybe down the road you'll want to, but you better be something of a master before you start creating this kind of alchemical combination between the two.
Right.
Know the tank first, and then make up your mind what to do. As long as you don't pee in it, most of the tank people are going to be pretty cool.
You're exactly right. You want to have your flotation experience. You want to know that it was the flotation tank and
right.
and you that made it happen, not some other medicine, something else that you're doing. There's a lot of experimentation done with a lot of different psychedelics in the tanks early on, and what we found out from it was that under in quotes normal dosages, some of those things just aren't very effective in the tank. It takes a certain amount of external stimulation to make those things work. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until you got into pretty heroic doses that it started to really affect the tank experience beyond just a feeling of euphoria or disconnection. So
know the medicine first.
Yeah,
don't mix your
medicines.
Yeah, until you're a master. Then,
right.
Once you're a master, then maybe take a little license to experiment with the scientific mind.
And once once our government has let up on some of that thing, and we can get back into safely and legally working with those
exploring
compounds.
The options. Yeah,
which
for sure.
Hopefully we'll be soon. It kind of seems like we might be on the course to opening up to that a little bit.
Rick Doblin and MAPS are working hard, and the
Rick's
Hefter Institute,
and
a lot of these people are working hard to make that happen. But for now, we got the tanks as medicine, and next time we'll have to talk about some other things too, because I'm sure you've had some other experiences in some of these other ways that we can reach this state as well. I certainly have, but the tanks are one of the best out there. So if you get an opportunity, hit up a tank.
Absolutely.
Thank you to you, sir, for pushing this industry forward. Also, if you're interested in potentially opening a float tank center, definitely talk to Kevin about his tanks. They're awesome.
Very state of the art and very user friendly.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. So hit him up about that. Much love, everybody. Sorry about the long hiatus for the Warrior Poet podcast. Had to get warmed up again. It was like I've been out of the game for a little while. I needed to stretch out here, but I think I got it down. So we'll hopefully keep this momentum going. Much love, everybody. Thank you, Orlando. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Aubrey. Thank you, Orlando. Later.